Liora Haynes never hesitated. The moment she found the lipstick stain on Ethan's shirt, she packed her bags, signed the divorce papers, and walked away without a second glance. Seraphine Lovett wasn't so forgiving. When she discovered the truth, that she had been nothing more than a mistress to a married man, her rage burned hotter than betrayal. Ethan Haynes thought he could have it all: a devoted wife, a secret lover, and an escape plan when things got messy. But what he didn't know was that one of the women he deceived wasn't just heartbroken, she was dangerous, and soon he would pay for his lies in blood. Liora Haynes had always believed in love, in commitment, in the vows she had spoken on her wedding day. She wasn't the kind of woman who doubted easily. She trusted Ethan, her husband, with her whole heart. They had built a life together, one that was supposed to last forever. Their marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage was, but it was strong, or so she thought. Ethan had been working longer hours lately, his business trips becoming more frequent, but she had convinced herself that it was just part of his job. He was providing for their future, for their baby. At 6 months pregnant, she had enough to worry about without adding suspicion to the list. That night, Liora had been folding laundry, mindlessly going through the motions as she organized Ethan's dress shirts. The fabric was crisp, freshly washed, smelling of detergent and faint traces of his cologne. It was a routine she had done countless times. Something simple, something ordinary. But the moment she lifted one particular shirt, her breath caught in her throat. A dark red smear stained the collar, unmistakable, vivid against the stark white fabric. Lipstick. For a moment, she told herself she was imagining things. Maybe it was makeup from a hug, an accidental smudge from a coworker. But doubt crept in, slithering through her mind, poisoning every rational thought. She never wore lipstick, not since her pregnancy. The morning sickness had made her sensitive to strong scents, and cosmetics were the last thing on her mind. She hadn't touched anything like that in months. Her hands trembled as she held up the shirt, examining it closer. The stain wasn't just a small smudge. It was smeared as if someone had pressed against him, lingered there, their lips brushing the fabric. Her stomach twisted. Her mind raced through possibilities, but deep down, she already knew the truth. There was no innocent explanation for this. She inhaled sharply, trying to steady her breath, but her chest felt tight. A deep, gnawing ache spread through her. She had trusted Ethan with everything. She had never once considered that he would betray her. The man who kissed her forehead every night before bed, who whispered promises into her ear about the future they would have with their child. Had he been lying all along? She thought about the late nights, the unanswered calls, the sudden business trips that never seemed to have a clear explanation. She had brushed those worries aside, convincing herself that Ethan was just busy, that stress was making him distant. But now, every moment of doubt, every unanswered question came crashing down on her all at once. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to cry. Not for him, not for a man who had disrespected their marriage, their family. She placed the shirt back into the pile as if it were something toxic, something she couldn't bear to touch any longer. Her mind was already made up. There was no confrontation, no second guessing. She wasn't going to let him gaslight her into believing it was nothing. She wasn't going to let him manipulate her into staying. She had seen enough movies, read enough stories to know how these situations played out. The lies, the excuses, the inevitable cycle of betrayal and forgiveness. But she wasn't that kind of woman. She would not be made a fool of. Liora pulled out her suitcase and started packing. She didn't need to hear Ethan's side of the story because there was nothing he could say to make this better. If he had been unfaithful once, he would do it again. And she refused to bring her child into a home built on deception. As she folded the last of her clothes into the suitcase, a sharp kick jolted her from her thoughts. Her baby. The only innocent one in this mess. She placed a hand on her stomach, breathing deeply, steadying herself. She wasn't just leaving for herself. She was leaving for her child. Without hesitation, she grabbed her car keys and walked out the door. Seraphine Lovett had always prided herself on being independent. She was the kind of woman who turned heads when she entered a room, not just because of her beauty, but because of the way she carried herself. Confident, composed, untouchable. She had worked hard to build a life of luxury, surrounding herself with expensive things, fine dining, and exclusive social circles, and when she met Ethan Haynes, she had thought she had finally found someone who could keep up with her. He had. Pursued her relentlessly, showering her with gifts, dinners at high-end restaurants, weekend getaways at hidden resorts. He had been charming, attentive, everything a woman could want. He told her he was single, that he had no obligations, no baggage, and she believed him. At first, things had been perfect. He always seemed eager to spend time with her, never hesitated to spoil her with extravagant presents. But lately, something had changed. The calls had become less frequent, the excuses more frequent. Business trips, work stress, family emergencies, he always had a reason why he couldn't see her. She had tried to be patient, but patience had never been her strong suit. When her calls started going straight to voicemail, her frustration turned into suspicion. A man like Ethan wouldn't just disappear, not unless he was hiding something. Determined to find out the truth, she decided to pay him a surprise visit. She knew where he lived. He had taken her there once when he claimed to be house-sitting for a relative. The memory of that night made her scoff now. How easy it had been for him to lie, to weave a story so effortlessly. She refused to be played for a fool. Pulling up in front of his house, she felt a thrill of anticipation. If he was avoiding her, she would force him to face her. She walked up the driveway, heels clicking against the pavement, and rang the doorbell. No answer. She knocked. Still nothing. Her heart pounded as she reached for the doorknob and twisted. It was unlocked. The moment she stepped inside, she knew something was wrong. The house wasn't empty. It was lived in, filled with warmth, decorated with personal touches. Photos lined the walls, pictures of Ethan smiling, holding a woman close, his hands resting on her stomach in a way that sent a sharp, nauseating realization through Seraphine. The woman was pregnant. The sight of the ultrasound images on the coffee table made her stomach drop. The name written on them confirmed everything. Liora Haynes, Ethan had a wife, not just a wife, a family, a child on the way. Rage coursed through her veins as she scanned the room, taking in every detail, the neatly folded baby clothes on the couch, the half-packed suitcase near the door. She wasn't just his mistress, she was a fool. She stumbled. Back, bile rising in her throat. How long had he been playing this game? How many times had he looked her in the eye and lied? And where was he now? Had his wife found out? Had she left him? Had she confronted him? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more unsettling than the last. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through their old messages. The sweet words, the promises, the declarations of love. All of it a lie. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. She had thought she was special, different. She had thought she meant something to him, but to Ethan, she had just been a distraction. A noise outside snapped her out of her thoughts, tires crunching on gravel, a car pulling into the driveway. Panic seized her as she realized she couldn't be found here. Not like this. Not after what she had just uncovered. She turned and slipped out the back door, disappearing into the night, her mind spinning with a single, burning thought. Ethan Haynes had played her, and he was going to pay for it. Ethan Haynes had always been good at keeping secrets. He had spent years perfecting the art of deception, knowing exactly what to say and how to say it to get what he wanted. Balancing a wife and a mistress was nothing new to him. It was a game. He had played before, always careful, always in control. But this time, something had gone wrong. This time, the game had slipped from his grasp. When Liora walked out, filing for divorce without a word of confrontation, he had been blindsided. He had expected anger, accusations, maybe even tears. Instead, she had simply left, shutting the door on him and their marriage as if he meant nothing. That should have been the end of it. He could have handled a divorce, moved on, rebuilt his life with Seraphine. But the moment she found out the truth, she had turned on him too. And that was when he realized how dangerous his situation had become. Seraphine was not a woman who handled betrayal well. She was the type to seek revenge, to strike where it hurt the most. He had seen flashes of that side of her before, the cold, calculating way she spoke about people who had wronged her in the past, the way she never let anything go. The last time they had spoken, she had been furious, her voice dripping with venom as she demanded answers. He had promised to explain, to fix everything. But deep down he knew there was no fixing this. That was why on the night he disappeared, he had been making plans. He had withdrawn a large sum of cash, just enough to vanish for a while, a fresh start somewhere far away. No wife, no mistress, no obligations. He had always been resourceful, always known how to slip away when things got too complicated. He had done it before, but someone had been watching. That night, as he left the ATM and walked toward his car, an eerie sense of unease settled over him. The streets were quiet, too quiet. He had parked in the back lot of a small, run-down gas station far from the main road, a precaution, but now, as he reached for his keys, a shadow moved behind him. Pain exploded at the back of his skull before he even had a chance to react. The world spun, his vision blurring as he crumpled forward, his body hitting the pavement. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was the gleam of a familiar pair of red heels. When he woke up, everything hurt. His head throbbed. His limbs felt heavy, and the metallic taste of blood coated his tongue. His hands were bound, his body slumped against something cold and unforgiving. A chair. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and something else, something sharp and metallic. The scent of rust, of old decay. He struggled against the restraints, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Panic clawed at his chest as he tried to make sense of where he was. The walls were concrete, bare, the only window covered with thick wooden planks. A basement. Somewhere isolated. Somewhere no one would hear him scream. Footsteps echoed across the floor, slow and deliberate. He knew, even before she stepped into the light, who it was. Seraphine. She stood before him, arms crossed, eyes cold and unreadable. Gone was the soft, alluring woman he had charmed. In her place was something else entirely, something ruthless, something unforgiving. For the first time in his life, Ethan Haynes understood what it felt like to be powerless, and for the first time he realized he might not make it out of this alive. The discovery of the blood-stained dress shirt changed everything. Up until that moment, the police had considered Ethan Haynes a missing person, an unfaithful husband who had likely skipped town after his life unraveled. It wasn't unusual for men like him to disappear, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and unanswered questions. But the moment the jogger found that torn shirt in the shallow creek, the case took a darker turn. Forensics confirmed that the blood on the fabric belonged to Ethan. There was no body, no sign of struggle, no murder weapon, just that single piece of evidence floating in murky water, raising more questions than answers. The case was no longer about a man who had run away. It was now about a man who might never be seen again. Liora was the first person detectives wanted to speak with. She had filed for divorce the same day she found out about Ethan's affair, leaving their home without hesitation. From an outsider's perspective, her timing was almost too perfect. A betrayed wife, a sudden departure, and now a missing husband. It didn't look good. Detective Marcus Vance had been in law enforcement long enough to know that, in most cases, when a husband vanished, the wife usually knew more than she let on. But something about Liora didn't sit right with him. She was calm. Too calm, not like someone hiding a terrible secret. If she had been involved, she would have shown some sign of guilt, some crack in her story. Instead, she was steady, firm in her answers. She admitted she had no idea where Ethan was. She hadn't spoken to him since the night she left, and most importantly, she had no reason to harm him. But someone else did. Seraphine Lovett had been the last person to report Ethan missing. That alone was unusual. Why would a mistress be the one to alert the authorities? Why would she care about a man who had lied to her? The police had dismissed her concerns at first, assuming she was just another scorned lover seeking attention. But now, with evidence of possible foul play, they had no choice but to dig deeper into her involvement. Detective Vance pulled Seraphine's financial records, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain her connection to Ethan beyond their affair. What he found was damning. A secret bank account, one Ethan had been depositing money into for months. Thousands of dollars transferred under vague descriptions, all leading to Seraphine. It wasn't just an affair. It was something else entirely. When questioned, Seraphine played the part of the devastated lover well. She cried on cue, claimed she had no idea why Ethan had been sending her money. She said he had been planning to leave his wife for her, that he wanted to build a new life together. But Vance wasn't convinced. If that were true, then why did Ethan withdraw a large sum of cash the night he disappeared? And why had his trail gone cold immediately after? The deeper they dug, the more the pieces started to fit together. Seraphine had a history of manipulation, of finding wealthy men and taking what she could before moving on. She had never been one to settle for disappointment. If Ethan had promised her a future and then suddenly tried to disappear, she wouldn't have taken it lightly. Then came the breakthrough. Security footage surfaced from a camera near the gas station where Ethan had last been seen. The footage was grainy but clear enough to recognize two figures: Ethan withdrawing money, and just moments later, Seraphine stepping out of the shadows. She had been there that night. She had followed him, and now Ethan was gone. The moment the security footage was revealed, the case took a sharp turn. What had once been a missing persons investigation was now something far more sinister. The evidence was undeniable. Seraphine had been with Ethan the night he disappeared. But the question remained: what had happened after? Detective Marcus Vance wasted no time. A search warrant was issued for Seraphine Lovett's home, a sleek penthouse in the heart of the city, the kind of place that screamed wealth, status, and power. But beneath the polished marble floors and designer furniture, something was off. There was no sign of Ethan, but the meticulous cleanliness of the apartment itself was suspicious. No dust, no stray items, everything too perfectly arranged, almost as if someone had scrubbed it down. Then, in the farthest corner of the penthouse, they found it. A single dried drop of blood near the baseboard of the hallway. Small, almost unnoticeable, but unmistakably human. Testing confirmed the worst. It was Ethan's. The evidence was piling up, but Seraphine remained unfazed when they brought her in for questioning. She sat across from Detective Vance in the sterile interrogation room, her posture poised, her expression unreadable. She denied everything, said she had nothing to do with Ethan's disappearance, that yes, she had met him that night, but only to talk, that he had been acting strange, paranoid, but she had left him at the gas station and never saw him again. It was a good lie, but not good enough, because while Seraphine was maintaining her innocence, forensic teams were scouring an abandoned warehouse just outside the city, one she had been seen visiting multiple times in the past month. The discovery was chilling, A hidden room, a chair, restraints, faint traces of blood on the concrete floor, and in the shadows, a single piece of evidence that would seal her fate. Ethan's watch shattered, its hands frozen at 11:47 p.m., the exact time his phone last pinged before going silent. When the evidence was presented to her, Seraphine's composure cracked, not all at once, but in subtle ways. The tightening of her jaw, the slight tremble in her fingers. She had spent her entire life controlling situations, bending them to her will. But this was different. This was out of her hands. Still, she refused to confess. Without a body, there was no murder charge. But there was enough. Kidnapping, assault, tampering with evidence. Charges that would ensure she never walked free again. The trial was swift. Witnesses came forward, people who had seen Ethan and Seraphine together that night, people who recalled hearing a muffled scream near the warehouse. The bank transfers, the blood evidence, the broken watch, it all painted a damning picture. But the final twist came when the prosecution revealed what they had been keeping quiet. A body had been found, not buried, not hidden, but deep in the waters of a secluded lake, weighed down with chains. The dental records confirmed it. Ethan Haynes was dead. Seraphine's reaction was instantaneous. The calm mask she had worn for so long shattered in an instant. She screamed, cursed, fought against her restraints as they read the final charge: murder in the first degree. In the end, justice was served. Liora, now a single mother, refused to attend the trial, choosing instead to focus on her child, to build a new life free from the shadow of Ethan's betrayal. She had already mourned the man she once loved. The man he had become was a stranger, and strangers were not worth grieving. As for Seraphine, she spent the rest of her days behind bars, her once glamorous life reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. And Ethan, he had thought he could play two women against each other. He had thought he could cheat, lie, and walk away unscathed. But in the end, he had paid the ultimate price.